Again, this is Mary Sagstetter from AbleNet. I am welcoming you to our webinar session today. We're going to talk about controlling the environment, and specifically we're going to talk about switches and mounting for access. And what I want to do is, before we get too far into this, we always like to have you know who is on the line with you. So please go ahead, fill in the bubble in front of your position. Let us know who you are, and we will watch as everyone fills those in. And as you're filling that in, I do just want to let you know that your tools, if you're a first-time person with us, at the top left-hand corner, you are able to go ahead and chat. We are not taking any audio calls. Everything has been placed on mute. So you may chat in the field, type in a chat, and I have Gloria on the other line who's supporting me. She'll go ahead and answer your questions. She'll also push over questions to me that are content related. And as we have those questions come across, I will take a break, and we will go ahead and answer those questions. I'm going to skip to results pretty quick here. It looks like the majority of folks are on the line. So let's see. Here we are. All righty. Again, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's session. Our goals for this session are threefold. One is to increase your knowledge of a variety of switches, increase your knowledge of mounting and the importance of it, and then take away some ideas that you're going to be able to integrate into your student's day, or depending upon where you're at your client's day, because we know that folks join us from outside the school system as well. In getting started, I am going to read these bullets to you because I think these are very important. The first thing I'm going to talk about is positioning of switches. It's important that we take the proper positioning of switches, communication devices, and environmental controls very seriously for the individuals that we work with. If we overlook this, it can mean the difference between the success and failure, comfort and fatigue, and the efficiency and wasted efforts of our students or clients. If we place a switch too far away from a person and they have to work really hard to get at it, then they're going to expend a lot of energy that they don't need to, and they're not going to feel success, and therefore may not continue on with that activity. Obviously, that is a very unsuccessful situation for us. So we really want to talk about or consider where these mounts, where these switches are positioned. And also, it's not only switches, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it's also those communication devices as well. When you think about selecting the right tool, the reason that we do that is we want to enable these people, people with disabilities of any ability, to participate all day long in every activity they're going to do at home and every activity they're going to do at school, in your classrooms, at work. So it's very important that we select the right tools. And one tool for a specific environment may not flow across all environments. So we want to keep really that mindset in place of the set. If you are familiar with that, you talk about the student. For those of you I said too that don't have students but you're dealing with clients, but the environment that the individual's in, the task that you're asking them to do, and then the technology that would be appropriate for them to have success within that particular task in that environment. And today what we're really going to talk about is you're going to have the opportunity to learn about the tools that will empower individuals to increase their independence, growth, and progress. So in getting started, this is how I want to frame our session today. This is a switch grid, we call it. It has the technical specifications of all of the AbleNet switches. What we've done is place this particular switch grid in the AbleNet catalog. We also have it as a download on our website. So you would be able to go out to the website underneath where we have the assistive technology and go to switches, and you will be able to find this. What's important about the switch grid is that it gives you information that typically just by looking at a switch you do not know. And this is how we make sure that we pick the right tool for the individual that we're working with. You will find things like the switch type. Is it mechanical or is it electronic? You will find how it's connected. Does it have a wire or is it wireless? Meaning I can pass it around the classroom and I'm not going to be tethered to a cord. We also talk about the activation surface, how large it is. What is the force? Do I need a lot of force to activate this? Do I need a little force? Having this grid in front of you will help you determine those switches to bring in and try out with students when you're working on assessments. And again, this is just a small view of what we have as far as the full grid, so you can download that from the AbleNet website. when we're talking about switches, we are talking about the fact that a switch is the interface between the individual and an object of control. So you can see here that we have the switch, and it's plugged then into the car. The car is battery operated, so it does need something called a battery device adapter that is inserted between the battery and the connection. Once we do that, we break the connection, that electrical connection, and we need then to put a switch in. So the switch is plugged into the little tiny port that's at the bottom, and I'll put an arrow right to that. And once we plug the switch in, now we have control. And basically, pressing the switch closes the connection, sends that signal so that that battery-operated car is going to move. Objects that can be controlled with a switch can be things like a computer, toys, radios, lights, fans, a lot of different appliances, even an iDevice. And we're going to touch upon those today. I do find it interesting that when I talk about a switch, some folks sometimes think about voice output devices. And I want to talk about the difference between these. When you have a switch, that is where you just have the switch, and that is in between, right? That is what's going to operate the object. So we're talking about having the little battery-operated toy here being plugged directly into the switch, and one activation of this is going to make that move. We also, most folks will talk about voice output communication aids. That's what VOCA stands for, and that's what this is here. This is a big step-by-step that I'm drawing an arrow to. That will speak. When you record messages into it, when you touch the top, it's going to speak. That will operate a battery toy or appliance if it's plugged in. But if it's not, this is primarily used for voice output communication. It sometimes gets a little confusing because the switch tops are on the top of a voice output device. But a true switch is something that's plugged directly into an object, and with the activation of the switch will make it move. Here, we can have that functionality through a voice output device, but I do want to clarify this for the presentation. So let's take a look at what switch activation looks like for this gal and the importance of it. So what we see here is an individual being able to activate a switch, which is going to then have that toy move towards her. Now, the interesting thing here we know is that this is a little gal that is not able to go and play with toys independently. It's a little gal that probably without this type of opportunity for access would not be able to put her nose into that pig independently and rub it around and feel that fur and have that sensory opportunity. She is in total control of this particular activity right now. And this is what we want to see for the individuals we work with, is them understanding, right, cause and effect, basically here at its finest. We want to move away from this. We don't want to have her for months and months and months only activating a pig like this, because she definitely will become bored. But this is what we want to see for individuals, and then we want to move them from this. We also think about here switch sites and where we place the switches. So I do have a question for you around that. When you think about this, which is the most popular switch site? Head, hands, mouth, or feet? Go ahead and answer that with a fillable circle right in front of there and submit your results. And once I see everyone's results, we'll go ahead and share that with the group. Or actually, you should be able to see that on your screen now. And we have quite a few folks on the line with us today, so we have almost all of them are submitting their answers. I'll give just a couple more seconds, and then ready, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's skip to total results here. So we have some that are feeling it's the head, but overwhelmingly it's the hands. And truthfully, the most popular switch site are the hands. That's where we always go first to see if someone can activate a switch with their hands. And what we find out a lot of the times is that they can't. So we take and we lift their hands up over the switch. And this is something that we want to make sure that we move away from. We want to make sure that we can find the ideal switch site for an individual. If they cannot independently move their hand, we need to figure out a way that they can access that switch. And I would say that that is one of the most challenging things sometimes for the individuals that we work with. This is where your occupational therapist, your physical therapist, this is where your team comes in so that you can take a look at finding that switch site that will be the most successful. But here's a few things you want to note when you're working on this, is that we want the individual we're working with only to have to make a small or an isolated movement. We don't want them to have to, as I mentioned before, reach far away for that switch and expend a lot of energy getting there. We want this to be simple and easy and fast, because if you think about it, they're going to need to activate that switch a lot. They'll have a lot to say. We have a lot of things we want to activate on an iPad or scroll through on the computer, right? So we need them to be able to have that be very easy and not a lot of energy expended. We also need it to be a voluntary movement. They have to be able to voluntarily or independently get to that switch. It can't be something that is the result of a reflex, right? Because then we can't count on it being a consistent movement. When you think about activation of a switch, we want to make sure that that individual is going to be able to control the activation as well as sustain it. So when you think about sustaining the activation, we may need to remain on that switch for a little period of time. We want to make sure that they have this opportunity to move forward and be successful within the activity that we are using the switch in. And here when we talk about control release, so when we talk about activation, they need to be able to control their movements to get to the switch, sustain that activation for as long as they might need to, and then release. So when you think about a switch, everybody think about having a switch in front of you, and go ahead and activate that switch. Well, if you activated it, so you put your hand on it, did you leave your hand there or did you take your hand off? Most of what we see is that an individual will take their hand and activate the switch and then move their hand away. Or think about a head switch. If it's by their head, they move their head over and they move off of that switch. And again, depending upon how we have our computer set up, how we have our iPad set up, how we have the environmental control set up, often will help with that release as well. But this is when we take a look at an individual, we want to see if they can move their body in such a way that they will be able to have a voluntary movement, be able to control their activation, sustain it, and then be able to release from that. If not, we do have to take a look at what we are activating and see if there's any features within that that will help us deal with how they are physically moving at that time or what they can actually handle or maintain. So let's think about some switch guidelines. Able.Med has put together a series of 4 questions that when you are thinking about choosing a switch, that you want to keep at the ready. The first one is, what is the most repeatable activation method? So again, is an individual able to repeat the activation method with their hands, their head, their mouth, a muscle contraction, whatever that might be, multiple times? Because as I mentioned, we are going to need to activate that switch multiple times. The next, very important, what device needs to be controlled? What's its location and what's the connection type? So if we're talking about activating an alternate spinner, that might be different than activating that we can plug a switch into. That may be very different than activating an iPad or controlling an iPad that we're not going to be able to plug a switch into, that we're going to look for a wireless connection. The third, how does the switch need to be positioned for repeatable activation with the least possible fatigue for the user? So again, do I need that switch? Can it be on the table? Does it need to be just mounted on the table, maybe at an angle? Does it need to be put more in if you're looking at this, an opportunity to get that switch up in air? What are we going to need to do with this switch so that we are not going to cause fatigue for our user and they are going to be able to repeat that activation? And then the last one, which kind of leads us into that wireless component, is do cords limit successful interaction with products or with devices? So you think about having a battery-operated toy, and if we are going to have a race, and if we have 2 battery-operated toys and we're using a regular switch and that toy will walk forward, it's only going to go or move as far as that corded switch will allow. So the race will always end at the end of a 6-foot cord. If we go ahead and we have a wireless switch, that toy could keep going. So again, we think about those particular components when we are looking at a switch. These are guidelines that you can also find on the AbleNet website. And again, when you're thinking about switches, it helps to have these at the ready. So let's talk about how it all got started. With AbleNet, obviously we have a large portfolio of switches, and the first switch that we created was the Big Red. That is a switch, it's a mechanical switch. It is 5 inches at its surface, so that switch top is 5 inches. You will notice that we do go a little bit beyond that as we move over the side. I'm just going to grab a tool here real quick. Here we go. We have holes right here, and I just covered that up, so this one I won't. We have holes that are drilled into the base of this, and that is specifically for mounting. So when you use a mounting plate, all of these switches then can be mounted in air. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more specifically when you see the mounts. But the first, it started with the Big Red. That's what I pointed to right there. The next is the yellow switch here, which is a smaller version of that, which is the Jelly Bean switch, and that's at 2.5 inches across. And then we have the Spec switch. That is our smallest in the same type of housing, if you will, or in the family, and that's at 1 3/8 inches for the switch top. So you can see that if an individual doesn't need a large switch, we can easily move down to something very small so their environment is not taken up with this large switch. The Spec switch, thank you, you say that 3 times fast, also has some options that the other switches don't have, which is we can take this base off, this black base at the bottom. This can come off, and what it turns into then is basically the switch right here. And it has basically a flange base. You can then have multiple switches if you wanted to use Velcro right next to each other, and there wouldn't be that in-between piece, if you will, with the black base. You also can take off those bases and put on another base that will hold a Velcro strap. The Velcro strap itself then can be used as a mounting system. So think about a headrest for someone. No longer might you need to have a big mount that's heavy. You can just put the Velcro strap around the headrest. Think about putting it around the armrest of a chair. Think about putting literally in a person's hand. So in the palm of the hand, if you put the Velcro strap around it, imagine that that was in your hand right now. Close your fingers. You would have that small switch in your hand, and if you could close your fingers, now you have the switch site. Or take that switch and move it to the back of your hand. So now on the back of your hand, if you could turn your hand or roll back over on that switch, you have another opportunity to activate that switch. What about your knees? How about if you take this Velcro strap and put it around a knee, and then you close your knees together? You could even do that on a foot. So this switch can be mounted on the body or on objects or items to go ahead and provide success for an individual. I will draw your attention to, let me get rid of these. I will draw your attention to the 2 last items at the bottom. One is about the twist tops. We do have our Big Red, and then we have those housings in the Jelly Bean size. These are tops that are able to come off of the products. We send all of the colors with you. So you will not have to go buy a blue, red, or green, or yellow specifically. You will have all of those switches in light of the fact that we send them with you. Some folks say that they would prefer to have those on a little tighter. What we found out is that if you take clear nail polish and put it around the top, those will stay a little more secure for those that might come loose, and yet you can still break that, if you will, not break it, but loosen it off to change the colors. So if you're having those switches, that tops that might come off occasionally, you can go ahead, tighten them up as much as you can. If that's still not enough for you, go ahead with that clear nail polish. Durability is an interesting factor. When we first developed the Big Red switch, it was put out in the parking lot, and they actually, true story, drove a car over it to make sure that it withstood the withstood a high level of force. We at AbleNet make sure that we do durability tests on all of our products. Usually a drop test ends up from about 3 feet, where we know students' tables are or their trays are, to make sure that it will withstand that multiple times for these particular switches here. But let's get into some smaller switches. Let's get into some more simple switches that end up to be more unique to an individual and what they might need based on their motor ability. So we might need switches like the microlight, and I'll circle them as I show them to you, but I will go in order. The microlight is a small switch that will requires very minimal movement. The top here can be switched out with another adhesive top for different colors. Next we have a small buddy, very similar to our jelly bean switch, but you'll notice it doesn't have the flange base around it. Also, this was a product from Tash. AbleNet purchased the Tash company, which had a series of switches, and added those to our portfolio a number of years ago. So if you're still familiar with Tash, these are the switches that we have brought in from that line. So we're supporting those as our product line. We also have then the big buddy and the small buddy. I'll just let you know are actually, I just put one on here, but you would have one that's at a 2.5-inch size and then another that's at a 5-inch size. So I didn't put two of them on here. It'd be a little repetitive. We do have a pillow switch. This is the inside of the pillow switch, so you can see what that looks like. It does have a more of a velour, kind of a brown covering that covers this so that you can take it off and wash it. But again, it's a nice soft switch, so if you're worried about someone having repeated activations on a hard surface and you have breakdown on any part of their skin or their body, this is a nice switch for that. The trigger switch is next, and this would have a small surface that can be activated with usually with an individual push here, and you would hear an audible, you would feel, I should say, a little mechanical pressure when you press that switch. You can kind of get a little click from that, so you feel that. And again, there's different colors that you can go ahead and obtain here. So depending upon either user preference or if they match with a specific activity, there's also a way to go ahead and secure them through the hole at the end here. You can put little screws in if you want to mount them that way. The grasp switch is exactly what it says. It's a grasp switch, and that allows for an individual to put their hand around it and basically close their fingers into their palm and grasp that switch, and then it would send that activation forward, activating whatever it is plugged into. And then one that I did not list on here, but I added at the last minute because I do like this switch. It's called a plate switch, and it actually reminds you of that. It's a flat surface, and it is a switch that you do have to bring your hand into, or your finger, an elbow, whatever it might be, and you do need to depress within the orange area, and then that's going to activate. All of these are mechanical switches, and all of them will have specific types of mounting opportunities. For example, there's a specific plate that goes with the microlight. There is literally a very high-tech mounting on our pillow switch that is either Velcro or a large safety pin. And how it was originally thought about too, and hence the name, is that it's pinned to the pillow. So while someone is at rest, they do have an opportunity to still communicate, to call someone, so that they still have control over their world. Last but not least, something that's very important, AbleNet has now come up with a new set of universal mounting plates. When you order a mount, and again I mentioned we'll get to those at the end of the session, these mounting plates now are included with the universal mounting plate system. And it's kind of like puzzle pieces where in one package you're able to mount the most popular switches that we have. So your big red switch, your jelly bean switches, you will be able to mount those, our Jelly Beam or wireless switches, and a variety of others. Simply by moving this base into the different areas here, you have those different size mounts. And they all come, mounting plate I should say, and they all come with all of the screws as well. So we're very excited about that. So just remember when you're ordering a mount, you want to look for the mount name with the universal mounting plate package, and then you'll have the mount that you need. A review of a few more switches before we move on. I want to make sure that you're fully aware of some of the specialty switches. The switches that are available come in many sizes, shapes, colors, sensitivity. One that has been new to AbleNet in our line is called the free hand, and that's the hand that you see at the bottom of your screen. It has a number of activation areas that when you push your finger, basically the tip or the fatty part of your finger, when you get to those specific activation areas, it will activate the computer. So this actually turns your computer, basically your hand, into a computer keyboard. So as we use a USB system to go ahead and activate working with our computer, or I should say taking your computer and assigning each one of those areas on the glove. So it's hard to see here, but let me see if I can't go ahead and use a different color. There we go. So as you use your computer, there are areas on the glove that once you plug the glove into your computer, you will assign these areas. When the tip or the fatty part of your thumb is connected or touches those areas, then that particular key command or keystroke will be emitted, and it will be push back to the computer. So when you're using a computer software program that requires space or enter, we can program space or enter. So again, it makes your hand emulate a keyboard. Next in line, just want to talk about a couple of the different switches here that you see. We'll start from the bottom. So when you look at the bottom, we have our string switch, hence the name. When you take a look at this, it will allow for a slight pull on this little area there, which is the little string. It will allow for an activation of whatever it's been plugged into. It requires minimal movement for that to happen, so very lightweight. Moving up, we have what's called the leaf switch. More looks like a paddle, and so basically you can move through this a little bit just by depressing this. It can either go kind of like by the face. You can put this by the knee. Again, it just is a motion that would move this over. And it would then obviously hook into, we have a port in the back. We'll plug into anything you want to activate. Same thing with our flex switch. And the name here, flex, because this area flexes. This is something that you can go ahead and, it's activated by bending in either direction. And so it's basically soft to the touch and moisture resistant. So if you wanted to use this in your mouth, you could. And our last set of switches here, and then what I'm going to do with these switches is I'm going to go ahead and put them all into practice. So we'll take switches and we'll show how they can be used in multiple scenarios throughout an individual's day. We have our wireless line. We have the Jelly Beamer Wireless, which is the first set. We have the Jelly Beamer Wireless SLAT, which stands for Switch Latch and Timer. And then we have the Mini Beamer SLAT, which also stands for Switch Latch and Timer. So let's talk about the functionality of these. When we think about a typical switch, as you saw in our video, that little gal activated the switch, and as she pressed down on that switch, the toy moved. When she lifted her hand up a little bit, right, it stopped. So as she directly applied pressure to the switch, the toy moved. When she lifted her hand up, it stopped. That is the same functionality that you will receive with the wireless switch. The difference here is that we don't have the cord. So that pig, if we would plug that pig in or set it up where the pig was being activated, now those of you that are online, so this will be my resemblance of that pig, okay? Not very good, but there's the tail. When it's plugged in, it goes into the battery compartment. Remember, with the battery device adapter, I can move this pig now forever. It'll keep going and going and going as long as I'm depressing the switch. When I lift off, it will stop. So I'm not encumbered by that cord. But I do need to apply pressure the whole time to make this move. If we take a look at the Jelly Beamer Wireless Switch, which is the second in the line, now we have a functionality that's been included that's called, this is that Switch Latch and Timer. We call it modes of control. When we plug this pig in now, again my picture was much better above, but we plug the pig in now, you have 4 different options that you are going to be able to preset or change at any time during this activity. And again, I'm using the battery-operated toy as an example. I am talking about any of the items that you would be using a switch with or any of the activities you would be using a switch with. So I press the top. I can set it into direct mode, which is going to work exactly like I just told you. I hold my hand down. Something's going to activate. I lift my hand off. It's going to stop. But now I can put this into time seconds, time minutes, and latch. I can run anything for a period of 1 to 99 seconds, and then it will stop, 1 to 99 minutes, and then it will stop. Or the latch mode is turning something on and off. And I have you think of a light switch. When you want a light switch on, you go over and you flick it on. When you want to turn it off, you turn it off. So here would be the same thing. I would press the top. It would start. It won't end or stop until I go back and turn it off. That is the SLAT piece where we end up with direct. We end up with timed seconds or timed minutes. So there's a timed feature. And then you end up with what we call, there we go. Let me write direct in here. So it's direct pressure, timed minutes or seconds, or you have latch. And those of you that use power links may already be familiar with those modes of control. We have set those up and used them in these products. Now, when we move to the Mini Beamer, this all applies. The new piece here is that you can see you have a digital display, so I can set up direct time, minutes, or latch, but I also have a lower profile and proximity. So I have the receiver, there we go, I have the transmitter, and I have the receiver. So basically, when I put my hand over this product here and only have to get within 10 millimeters, it will activate, sending the signal over to the receiver, and then it's going to it'll run that toy or appliance for whatever I have predetermined. And again, anytime during that activity, if I want to change that, I can easily do that with the little buttons on the side. 3 wireless switches that we have available for you. Right now you're seeing the small versions. In the first 2 with the Jelly Beamers, these are our small versions. We also have the large 5-inch plate as well for those individuals that need that. But now we can access battery-operated items, voice output communication aids. Again, this is VOCA, voice output communication aids, electrical appliances, computers, and yes, even iDevices. Your setups would look like this. And I know not everyone has a donkey like this from the movie Shrek, but here we have the availability to activate this. We also then would take a look at battery-operated appliances. Sometimes you find things that are pre-adapted, which is great. If not, remember I mentioned that you need to have the battery device adapter, and that is a small copper disc with their end, and then it has an opening here for the switch to plug into, and that we can find those on our website as well. They're called battery device adapters. And what we're used to is students being able to engage in sensory activities. So it's great that we're going to be able to have a student be in control of something like this, but what I like to see is bringing this into content, bringing this into where we have active engagement, where we've read a story, and now through the use of switches, our students can take that billy goat and knock the troll off the bridge. With a few simple adaptations, with us bringing a battery-operated toy in, taking that character, having that put on a battery-operated toy with Velcro, and now moving it across, that troll is going to come off the bridge. But I also can read a book about apples. And here I just literally photoshopped in for your view what that might look like. So any book that I read, I can make come to life for my students. They are going to have power and control. What you see here is a regular switch. We also can put in, a cordless switch. But this is a little different. Remember what I mentioned initially? A voice output communication aid is not primarily a switch. Its foremost function is to have voice output, yet it can behave like one when you have the cord appliance cable. So something to note if you didn't know that. Again, more ideas. Let's think about access to appliances. The classroom newspaper could not be finished without having someone being able to staple that together. Battery-operated staplers work great. This is a setup that you see here for a corded switch. And again, you can also think about having that wireless included. Here's a view of wireless when you're using an alternate spinner. This is a version of one of our original spinners. You will also see on the next slide that that has been updated. And if you're interested in updating your spinners, we do have a product replacement program. Using your switches, whether they're cordless or corded, we now with an alternate spinner can place puzzle pieces on here, and students can randomly choose puzzle pieces. The same thing for art projects, as long as they don't need to be completed in a certain order. We're up in Minnesota here. We do a lot of art projects. In Christmas time, we do reindeer. And so all of the parts, the antlers, the red nose, we have the face, the eyes, are placed on the alternate spinner and then randomly selected. Many of our students can't pick up those materials like other kids can, but they sure can choose them independently, or I should say randomly with the spinner. When it gets to that, then someone else can pick that up and they can put it on that particular art project. So again, as long as it doesn't need to be in a certain order, our students can guide someone else, another student or a paraprofessional within that activity and have that active engagement. Alphabet letters, numbers, names, photos, jobs, content picture symbols. This is an example you see on the screen are actual books that students can then randomly choose, right? And as we go through these activities, teachers can bring in a bit of math. The one thing you don't see here is that this particular overlay, these will, when you turn them over, they're blank. And so when they're blank, that means that the visual that's on the front is going to be highlighted. Right now those numbers are a little distracting, but it comes with that overlay. So that means any game that we have dice, that our students aren't able to throw, now they can actually spin. So it's a great tool. And again, here's one more example, thinking about any time you might have a matching activity going on for your students. We can have one set of items on the spinner and the other can be on the table as well for a student to pick up and then place on their card. So just a way to show how these wonderful tools gain access and have our students actively participate. Also thinking about access to print materials, we have a tool called the Bookworm. Here we go, I'll give a better picture of it. The Bookworm, where a book can be placed on the Bookworm, all of the pages or the text from the pages can be recorded, and students then are able to go ahead and read the book sequentially through the use of a switch. So here you see a Jelly Bean switch plugged in, and this student has it Velcroed on his tray. The next student that you see is using a candy corn. That particular switch is a proximity switch. If you come within 10 millimeters of that switch, it will activate. So the student doesn't need to have a lot of pressure or a lot of strength to be able to participate in the activity of reading the story and gaining access to print materials. Please note that on the VOCAs, or the Voice Output Communication Aids, and what you see here are just a few that AbleNet has, all of these have ports in the back. And those ports, I'll just draw this arrow here. There's a port that says toy appliance, and there's a port that says switch. Now I've showed you with the example of the 3 Billy Goat Scruff that if you activate the voice output device, that you can actually make it run a battery operated toy. And you also saw that example within the fan. So please note that you can set any one of your messages to activate your toy or appliance on the correct message, or you could set it for every one. That is the toy appliance cable that goes into that port. There is another port that says switch, and that is where you plug the switch. And folks would say, well, why would I do this? Well, Alicia here is our model. You can see here that if you cannot get to, the top, which is actually a switch, but the activation surface for the voice output piece, we can plug this in so the switch on the tray now can be mounted by her head. So she can have access to those same messages. We just need now to have the right tools to mount that. Let's talk a little bit about wireless access to the PowerLink and what that means. You've been introduced to the Jelly Beamers. Those of you that know about the PowerLink, this is the new version, and it has some nice new features on it. Primarily the digital display is one that folks are liking the most, because now you know exactly when the activity is going to end and when the student needs to either activate it again. We also have a count for data collection, and then there's a 2 switch, which means that you have to activate or depress both switches at the same time for whatever appliances that you have plugged in. So if you had 2 lights plugged in, they would not activate unless you had both switches activated at the same time. Another piece here is that when you notice, you're seeing that you have 2 transmitters, but you are not seeing the receiver. Now the receiver is that piece that was that oval piece that had kind of like almost that mouse tail sticking out the end that plugged in. And this piece here now has been built into the PowerLink. So you do not need to have the receiver, only the transmitters. So this particular new design of the PowerLink has provided that opportunity to have less technology but have the same opportunity. So again, one activation of the transmitter or the Jelly Beamer transmitter will then speak to the PowerLink and activate the side that it's been assigned to. So you have 2 sides, a right and a left, and you can either assign them direct to each of the Jelly Beamers, or you can assign both sides I should say, to one Jelly Beamer, or if you have multiple students in the classroom working on the activity, you can assign multiple Jelly Beamers to the same side. So the functionality has increased tremendously, and I want to show you some examples around that. So think about this gal here. She's currently using a corded switch to plugged into one of the older units. Remember I mentioned that we upgraded with all these new features just in the previous slide. So if you're looking to upgrade, we do have a product replacement program for that. It is plugged into a water pick. And the water pick will then force, basically when activated, will force water up into the cord into this little wand right here that is meant to clean your teeth, but we are using it to water the plants here. So this little gal has total control over watering of the plants. It can't happen with her partner unless she activates that switch. Thinking about other classroom projects when we're working on vocational centers, we can use the shredder. And it's really important that when we think about our projects that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, kind of like a story. Everything we do with our students should be for a purpose. It should be real. It should be functional. It should not be just for doing the sake of a task, but what is the final outcome of that, and how can the student be part of that and see their results and see what they've been working for. So we don't shred paper just to shred paper. We shred paper because we can bring it to the vet clinic. We shred paper because we have a classroom pet that needs it. We shred colored paper because we have bags that need to be stuffed to protect something because it's going to be a gift. We're having an event in the classroom. The school's having an event. We shred paper because we are going to use that for decorations. We have a purpose for our students so that they can see what they're doing and see the outcome. Think of anything that can plug into the wall outlet. You will now, well, I'll hold that thought. Not anything. This is not for dishwashers. This is not for microwaves, so you need to stay within a certain wattage. But we talk about maybe those low voltage appliances, but a sewing machine definitely will work. And you think about different things that could be made in the classroom. I've had classroom quilts made out of students' fabric that parents have sent in from home. Again, quilts that are then sent back as gifts to parents. We've had many different things that happen via a sewing machine. Also, when you think about this, most of us think about using the PowerLink in more of a food orientation piece. Well, let's bring it right back into nutrition. Let's think about healthy snacks. Let's make sure that if we're using a corded switch or a wireless switch, that we have this based around the whole activity, that the students are choosing whatever goes into the blender, that they have an opportunity to communicate as well as use a switch during this time, that you're making boards, that communication boards that either are manual or are used on different devices. So the opportunity to guide and control the activity is part of your whole plan when you set up your lesson. As a takeaway for you today, I did have this posted, so in your thank you email or before, you may have already received this. This is one of the remarkable ideas from AbleNet that talks about making sunshine shakes, and it has all the information that you need to get ready, activity steps, as well as a script that's listed out. We have a number of these activities that bring in different AbleNet technologies, opportunities for switch use and control out on the AbleNet website under our Remarkable Idea portal. So keep checking back there. We go ahead and we load new ideas every so often. Think about this within the classroom. Again, I want to bring this into a functional use for you when we talk about students being in control of their environment, in control, having active engagement. If you have those light brights, we definitely can bring in concepts of print. We also could bring in different colors, etc. We have an opportunity to turn that light bright on and off. Think about reading time in the classroom. You can go ahead and plug in a fan. You can plug in lights. And as the teacher's reading, we can either talk about the wind and turn the wind on in the story, or we can have the light signify the sun. We also could have the light signify the amount of time a teacher was reading. And you can bring in floor lamps, desk lamps from home, any type of a lamp that you have. You can have this as available in your classroom for the reading center. You could also have this available not only as for the amount of time you're reading, but it could be something like as you read, you've set it for a period of maybe 30 seconds. When the light goes off, the comment is, oh, I won't be able to see without the light. Can you turn the light back on? And as the light gets turned back on, then you would go ahead and read. What about math? Again, here's that other example I keep bringing back in. The voice output communication aid primarily is not a switch. It is a voice output device, but with the cord plugged into the right port on the back of it, we can add voice to any activity that we typically used a regular switch, either a corded or a wireless for. And now that I show you this, we say, is this really about math? How could this be about math? Well, let's take a look. So using the power link and using air through that blow dryer, we can take a lightweight ball and blow over all of the bowling pins that really are just paper around empty water bottles. And then we can go ahead and we can count those. So let's take a look at what that might really look like in a version that we've recorded for you.
How many did I get?
And if that was a little hard to hear, what you'll notice that what we've done is we talked about activating the power link to bowl, and you'll notice that there's two pieces of wood to basically hold that ball in play. And then the next message on the voice output device, which is an iTalk 2, provides the opportunity to identify how many bowling pins are there, count the pins. Then we have the Super Talker set up with the number of pins that you could possibly knock down. So we brought the math into this as well, right? So again, it's about taking and making sure that the students have power control and access and bringing them into these activities or our lessons as we move forward during our day. And then also think about different opportunities for students. We are talking about switch use today, but I can't ever stress enough how important core languages, and as we work in an activity providing access via switch use, we also have to make sure that our students are able to communicate. Our lessons and the activities that we work on with students should provide opportunities for communication, problem solving, and interaction. Those are the things that are being looked for right now when we take a look at Common Core. So think about the overlays that you would be making for students. And here, think about core language, meaning those words that if we teach our students these core words that come up over and over again, they will be able to say more and have more control over interactions with others. And just as a little side note, did you know that with the right 15 core words, you would be able to say 48 different things? So if we could teach our students to be successful with 15 words, they would have 48 things that they could novelly say and interact with folks. So again, core language is really important. But back to our access piece. So I'll get off my little bandwagon there and talk about access with our computers. So currently what you're used to is having students probably have an alternative keyboard is the most common thing I see as I go into classrooms. Maybe something that up here you see the keyboard. We have keys you see and the big keys. So the keys you see, obviously with the name, you can go ahead and you see that these fonts have been enlarged on the keypad. Also the big keys, these are actually larger keys that our students use. But if they don't have that motor access, then what happens after that? Then we talk about alternative mice possibly. So could we use something like, here we have our rock. So a hand would just hold on to the top of that and you'd be able to guide the mouse back and forth. And there's also, you could take off the top T-bar and you could put on a ball. So that hand might be able then to go ahead and move that mouse if they can't use that typical mouse. Also, another solution might be a track ball. So the track ball itself, that would go where you can move your hand obviously back and forth and around. It's the largest 3.5-inch ball. It's the largest track ball that's available today. And again, both of these two solutions have alternative access for that right and left click at the different areas on these particular units. Many of the students that have more significant challenges then use what we call the Hitch. And the Hitch will plug into your computer with a USB port, and then in each one of the little locations in the bottom, and I'll show you a larger view of this in one moment, you can plug in an external switch. So once you plug in an external switch, which is either corded, or again, you could have that wireless piece, right? So this would be wireless, and then our transmitter would be over here. You have access to all of these different key functions that you would see. So you can see the up arrow, the down arrow, the left arrow, the right arrow, the click, the F function, space, enter, tab as you take a look at all of the different key commands. Now it's about what computer programs are you using and how is that student going to be able to access them. So this is called the Hitch. It's a computer switch, right? It's a computer interface that you would use one or up to 5 switches then to gain access to whatever you are using or whatever software program you have. So here, when we take a look at what this might look like in the classroom, when we're plugged into the Hitch, we still have to think about where these switches are mounted. So here's a mount right definitely on the computer. Here's a mount using one of the mounting arms for a student who is in a stander. Here's another opportunity here to take a look at the Hitch, and I'm going to just draw a line to it so you can find it or circle it. There you go. And this is set up wirelessly, right, so that this student can run this computer software, and it's more of a cause and effect software right now. So he's using it's plugged into one location. And then the student next to him, you'll notice, is using a keyboard, but again, that's a colored keyboard, so he can help find the different letters a little bit easier. And then here is another little example, but for a student that is using a big red switch and now has a puzzle activity. This again is a cause and effect opportunity that when he activates the switch, a new puzzle piece will be included. And as an aside from this, this is an individual that is in a local group home that we were working with, and he was using a, if you remember those the block sorting activity, it's like a yellow plastic circular container with the top that has all of the different pieces. That was his thing. He loved to do that. And thinking about how they were going to move him into something more age appropriate and give him more experiences, that they thought, what else can we do? So the idea was, what else could he access that might be something more visual for him that we could then start to move him into other academic kind of or content area things. And so it was that the puzzle was a software that mirrored what he was doing motorically. And so now he had the opportunity to do kind of a similar thing using the computer and switch access. So the Hitch made that possible for him. So that's what it is about. It's having the right software as well. So when we think about having the right switch for an individual and deciding upon where the switch is placed and how they motorically can get to that, as well as what kind of strength they have, it's also about what can I use with them or what is going to make the most sense. So when we look at different pieces of software, and there's many out there, I just listed some ones that I've had experience with myself and that I know are switch accessible. But please note this is in no way a comprehensive list right here that you see. So Laureate Learning Systems deals with literacy. Data collection is also within that. MarbleSoft is another opportunity for software that, again, is switch accessible, again, using the Hitch. Then you take a look at inclusive technologies. You also might be saying, well, what about the iPad? What about the iPad? I agree with you. We'll talk about that next. But right now I am talking about the computer. And how do I access that computer software that you still may have in your classroom? You just may not know that it's switch accessible, number one. You have to go into the teacher options or into the control panels to find those out. Inclusive Technology is a great company, makes a lot of software that's switch accessible, and again has support materials. Now all the three I just mentioned are for purchase. You think about the fact that there are, or I should say we also know that there are free opportunities. So Priory Woods is a great opportunity to try things either right from your computer or to download. Tar Heel Reader is an amazing resource of literacy PowerPoints that are accessible, and audio. You can choose the different voices that you want, so you can use these as well. Sometimes it is about placing the mouse on the particular spot that you need to activate when you are working with students to have accessibility. So for reading these particular books, they have a right and a left arrow. You would just place the mouse on the arrow and to go ahead and turn this forward. And then wherever that mouse is placed, that's what you're going to end up activating as the student activates the switch. And then the last one, free switch sites. This is amazing. I found this on Pinterest. If you go out there and you have this in your handout, it lists a ton. That's why I'm saying this is in no way inclusive of what's out there for purchase, but yet for free, Pinterest has a number of them. So you'll want to check that out for sure. Let's move into that iPad access in our last couple minutes here and talk about the fact that, yes, you can access the iPad and you can access all of the iPad, all of the apps through the new Bluetooth switch. This is the new switch from MABLEnet. By pairing this to your iPad, it will allow you for either single or you can have dual switch, so you can use that type of access. So you'll be either using automatic or two-step switch scanning to get into your apps and then to function within the app itself. You also can plug in a dedicated switch. So whatever switch your student's using, you would then be able to go ahead and plug that in. Or remember, we have the wireless switch as well. So you don't have to worry about that. It will accept those. AbleNet has come up with a number of videos that you will definitely want to take a look at. These two are in your handout, and they show you exactly how you can do two-step switch scanning, single-step auto scanning, and the setup for that. We have a demo here on how to play Angry Birds. It's incredible. Now students that never before were able to access a typical popular app by everybody else can do that. There's a couple different pieces that happen with this. It might not function exactly like you think it might function. I did a long webinar about iPad access and iOS. It's out. It's recorded already on our website. You may want to take a look at that to see these videos in action as well, because I embedded those in there, but it also gives way more information than I'm going to be giving you today. But I am going to show you some students. If anyone's using the Bluetooth switch from AbleNet, that is the black one here. We do have a product replacement program, so we can help you get into this switch at a reduced cost. Just let us know. Here's a little guy in Florida that just got his Bluetooth, and we were able to get his photos. And you can see here with his setup, he definitely then is able to go ahead and have access to his communication. And that's what it's about. It's about having the right setup for our students as we move through and being able to access the appropriate switches. Also, it's about mounting. And this piece here is called the adjustable, and it is a mount that will be, it's a suction cup mount. It will hold your iPad up in air. It also will accept any of the following cases. So if you're protecting this iPad, you will be able to go ahead and have that inserted with the iPad. You won't have to take it out of its protective case. Mounting for our switches also happens, though, with mounting arms. And AbleNet has a series of mounting arms, and they are designed to hold up to 5 pounds of pressure. They are available in many different, if you will, varieties or patterns here. So you can see that we have a hover mount. This is actually made out of an ultra light material. You'll also have their mounting arm that has a lever, or they have a friction knob. It's about where you're going to be using this, who's going to be using this, placement, etc. Flexibility. So when you look at the latitude, all of these rods will actually, you can compress them or you can extend them to change the height. And then also if you needed something that actually was more like a gooseneck, that you could move all in one and then reposition, you have that available as well. And for anything that would be used on a tray or a table, we'd have a suction cup mounting type as well. Those are the pieces that are very important so that students, wherever they are going to be using their switches, by their head, by their face, by their hands using the computer, activating a fan, their shoulder, their elbow, their knee, their foot, that they have those pieces available to them. And don't, or I should say, and we also include mounting that iDevice as well. So it's not only mounting switches, voice output communication aids, anything up to that 5 pounds of pressure, we can also take care of mounting those iDevices. And with that said, I do want to bring this to a close and want to put it all together for you. So when we think about having switches, when we think about having access for our students to regular ed content, to being actively engaged, I would like to end with this short video that shows you participation at a science fair, and Minnesota Science Fair. We're up in the Midwest here. Tornadoes are very popular, where they have access to reading the story and then also the simulation of what happens when a tornado is in sight. And there you have it. So you can see that with one activation, we can actually bring our students in to this whole experience. This is a wonderful opportunity when you think about all of the different ways that one switch for the student, when we've paid attention to making sure that the right switch is chosen, that they have it in the right place, that they have the right mounting for it, that they would be able to actively participate within not only this type of activity, but anything that we're going to be taking a look at throughout the course of their day to build growth, independence, and progress. So what I hope that I've helped you out with today is that I've increased your knowledge of some switches. I've made you dangerous. You need to do more research on your own. You need to take a look at that chart or at our website. I hope I increased your knowledge of mounting. Again, enough to make you dangerous with knowing there's lots of different types of mounting out there. It is about the individual. It all does go back to your team. Please, please check with your OTs, your PTs. Get that team together. Make sure that we have switch sites for individuals that you're working with. Some students are going to be pretty easy. Others are going to be very challenging, but don't give up. It is a way for those students to gain independence. And again, I hope that you've, on top of all of that, that you've been able to take away a few ideas that you can integrate into your students' day. Thank you so much for attending today. Please note that this is one of many of the AbleNet University webinars that we have for you. Live webinars are going to come to your email box. All of these are recorded and posted on our site. Mention these to your friends and colleagues, and they will also receive an opportunity to build their knowledge and capability. Thank you so much for your time and attendance. And I look forward to having you attend another AbleNet University webinar soon. Have a great rest of your week.